Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell us what was your journey to becoming an author?
My name is Huda Al-Marashi. I had a very long road to becoming an author. I can't say that I'm one of those people who always knew they wanted to be an author, and that is a real, was just purely an issue of representation. You know, I was a kid who loved to read and loved to write, but had never seen an Arab writer anywhere, had never seen an Arab person represented in a book. And I just thought, okay, well, that's something that's just not open to somebody like me. And I went through college and I majored in history because I loved people's stories. I loved storytelling and I loved writing. And I figured I would just be a history professor. And writing ended up being something that was very tied to being a mother, because when I had my first child and I found myself in a position where I really couldn't go back to graduate school, and I just sat in this quiet with myself and I said, okay, but what can I still do? And I asked myself, and if there was only one thing I could do with my life, what would I want that to be? And I just remember this voice saying, like, if I could just move somebody with my words, that would be enough. Like just one person. And I just started with that really small goal. And I think a really small goal is a really great way to enter into the writing life. And I just started taking my first classes, and my whole writing career was catered to writing to adults. And this move into writing to children is something that's kind of new for me, but that I love being in this space.
So what prompted you to start writing for middle grade?
And it really was a response to writing for adults and writing that memoir. I think I got into the topics that I wanted to write, and a lot of the motivation for that was the early 2000s was such a hard time to be an Arab and a Muslim. And I think a lot of us entered the arts in that time frame trying to kind of humanize our representation. You know, it was a post 9/11 world, and specifically for Iraqi Americans, we were really responding to the Iraq War as well. But you know what I found is that like adults' ideas were already so formed that it was hard to have a conversation unless they already had an open mind and had a sort of level of acceptance. And I remember feeling like all these conversations I want to have, and the real change happens younger. You have to start identifying with protagonists when you're a child, right? Because all readers that come from minority backgrounds, we have to read protagonists that are unlike ourselves. We just won't, and we're used to making that stretch. But what I found is this kind of resistance to identifying with me in the memoir, and in the adult books.
Interesting. And kind of like you were saying, I mean, these kind of conversations are so much more likely and helpful with younger people, like middle grade. So tell us about your new book, Hail Mariam, because as you mentioned, like this is, I mean, as you said offline, really is about teaching kids how to have these kind of respectful conversations about difference that a lot of times we don't have as adults, that we have a hard time having. So what? Tell us about the book and what was your inspiration?
Well, Hail Mariam, coming from a background in memoir, a lot of it is told from my own experience. I did go to a Catholic middle school. I went on actually to go to Catholic high school and a Jesuit university, but we can get into that a little bit more later. Hail Mariam is the story of Mariam Hassan. She is starting 6th grade at her local Catholic school, and she is really struggling. She wants to be a good student, a good friend, a good daughter, and a good Muslim. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be a good Muslim in a Catholic school? And so this is the story of Mariam trying to find her way and find her place in her community and in her family and in her school.
And I have to say that the book does, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it does deal with some really serious issues. But it's so funny. I mean, even just I was thinking about the opening of the book as she's, she thinks she sees Jesus, and she's trying to figure out how do I, also when she goes to the Catholic school and she sees, you know, as you explain, in Islam, you're not supposed to have representation of holy figures. And there you are at a Catholic school, just surrounded by statues and representations. And then, so what do? Does she just sit in class and close her eyes? I mean, so some of the situations are quite funny and how she deals with this. But maybe we could talk a little bit more about your upbringing, your interfaith education, and how did you use that in kind of crafting this novel? I know you said a lot of the things that happened to Mary in the book actually happened to you.
Yeah, that's absolutely a perfect segue, because that opening scene of her being so uncomfortable comes straight out of my sixth grade memories. And I do remember sitting in that classroom in the first day of school, and there was this crucifix hanging above the chalkboard, and wondering, like, what was the right way to respond to this image. And of course, coming back to it now as an adult with the benefit of all the other education I had, I was using these moments, right, as a tool to set up the conversation I wanted to have. And I started Mariam in this very kind of exaggerated sense of black and white, right or wrong, because it gives me more opportunity to show her transformation. But so much of what Mariam happens to Mariam, it was based on my own interfaith education. And I don't think I realized how formative that education was until I became an adult, until much later in life, looking back and realizing what a gift it is to have been immersed in another faith tradition. And it started to feel like a sort of bilingualism, like another language. When I travel, I felt very comfortable visiting churches. The iconography is something that I could just enjoy and admire for what it was, and no longer had to have this kind of like, oh, I'm in a different space, let me respond to it from a place of difference. It poured a foundation of acceptance, which is, absolutely what you said in the beginning was one of my primary goals for this.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, something I think you as you kind of mentioned, that stood out for me is how black and white her thinking is at the beginning, which I think is true for a lot of kids. And partly maybe our own fault of how we present things to them, and partly just developmentally, they want to know, okay, what is right and what is wrong? What are the rules that I'm supposed to do? And then things get very confusing for her, even within her own family, that people have different ideas. But so how does that all kind of feed into what you want kids to take away from this idea that we can be different, we don't have to agree, but we can still be respectful of each other?
Yeah, that black and white narrow worldview, I think it's something like not just kids struggle with. Sometimes, when you grow up in a faithful family, I'm sure you've seen it even in adults. Mm-hmm. And it was really even reflecting on some of the adults around me that motivated me to write this, because I thought something didn't happen in childhood to pry this door open, where you were given permission to look at things with a little bit more nuance. And again, going back to that idea of starting conversations younger, when we teach children about religion, there's a small time frame, and you can see the kind of panic a lot of parents have of like, I only have this much time, where I want to just get these rules across, and I want to make sure they know enough about faith. But I don't think we talk to children enough about religion with a lowercase r, and to say, like, what is the actual institution of this? That sure, there are divine inspirations, and we can learn about whatever spiritual traditions we have, but then this is a system that's been developed by a lot of human hands. And these revelations came to us from a long time ago. So it's something that as we learn about our faith, we can be awake to, is what kind of human influence might have shaped this. And then that empowers us as we are encountering things that are difficult. And I think sometimes adults make the mistake of thinking encountering things that are difficult will turn our kids away. But you want to give them the tools when they're encountering things that are difficult to not have to throw away the whole thing. And I think we see that a lot too. But when we understand that the system of religion is creating friction here, then you can find your way to coexist in those teachings when you understand where some of these things are coming from.
That's interesting because one of my favorite characters in the book, who actually is not in it that much, really, is the priest, the
Yeah.
father. And he says, he tells Mariam that adults don't give young people enough credit to understand complex issues like religion and come up with their own ideas. So in the story, how does she, I mean, it kind of goes to what you're talking about. Like we don't think they can handle nuance or difficulty, and in some cases making their own decisions. And I think sometimes as adults, we don't think they're capable, and maybe we're a little nervous of what they're going to come up with. So how does she kind of find her own way in this story?
Yeah, so going back to Father Brian, a lot of him was inspired by some of the college professors I had at Santa Clara University, which was a Jesuit school. And I think they were the ones that started, presenting that idea to me. Like, it took me that long, the nuance that I'm giving Mariam was not something I had available to me in middle school. And I remember having similar conversations with those professors and being hungry to hear more. Like, what do you mean things don't necessarily have to be black and white, right or wrong? Like, we're talking about religion here, right? Like, that's what religion is all about. What I'm supposed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. And, they introduced the whole idea of like the text in the context and bringing that into consideration. And the idea of like, that there's the possibility for religious metaphor. So all of those things became these invitations to just think differently. And so Father Brian was my opportunity to plant those seeds in Mariam. But for Mariam, in order to get this more nuanced understanding, she has to earn it through a lot of heartbreak, right? She has to try on doing things and see that it doesn't quite work out for her. And I think the take-home message with that, for parents is, if you're not having these conversations with your children, they are going to make up the answers for themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're going to fill in the blanks, which is what Mariam is doing, right? She's filling in the blanks. She's assuming what her mom and dad would say that she should do in this circumstance.
But that kind of leads me to another aspect of the book, which is that she ends up handling a lot of things that I think in many cases the parents would handle, partly because she knows they're so busy. A lot of times I know that happens in immigrant families where children kind of, because of the language barrier or cultural barrier, they end up taking on the role of a translator or mediator. But also something I feel like I've heard about a lot in podcasts recently, the oldest daughter syndrome, which is stronger in certain cultures, a lot of times in immigrant families. So how does this kind of show up in Mariam's case with this pressure she feels that she's taking on more of an adult role, taking on more responsibilities than she thinks she really should be asked to do?
Yeah, I think I wrote this book before the internet had kind of coined the eldest daughter syndrome phrase, but I can't tell you how much that has just captured something for so many people in my life who are eldest daughters of immigrant families. And we're constantly sharing the reels about them and the conversations and the podcasts. And let's talk about this eldest daughter syndrome, because it is something that does really truly play out in these families. And Mariam is a classic example of that. And, and talk about it being so natural and so real. Like, I wrote it before I even had the language to say, oh, Mariam suffers from eldest daughter syndrome. This is just who she was in her family dynamic. And it is taking on too much. It is assuming that her parents don't have the time or wouldn't want to engage, and that she's somehow doing them a favor by sparing them from knowing what's really going on with her. And that's absolutely pulled from my own life. My mom used to tell me, my signature, just sign it. And I wondered, even when I was writing it, I would pose this question to a lot of my feedback partners: do you believe this? Like, it is real, but do you believe that, a child would do this? And the ones that did come from immigrant families were like, oh, totally. I did it. I absolutely did that. You know, my mom also said the same thing. You just take care of it. And I hope this book helps kids that are in a similar position feel seen by it, but also wake up a little bit that you might be assuming a little bit too much. And mom and dad are capable than more than you think they are.
Right, right. And it does really add to this pressure that she feels under, these responsibilities that she has, you know, taking care of her sister, handling things at the school. And added on to that, as you said, was that she feels like she needs to take on the role of good student for her parents who have a really high expectations, but also being the only Muslim student. And she really takes that on, that she has to disprove all of these stereotypes, which I imagine must be such a common situation. I mean, that's one thing it was interesting. We asked when we did the giveaway, asking people about being in a minority situation. And sometimes it's not necessarily a negative, but I think in this situation for Muslim kids, because there are so many negative stereotypes, it can be a really difficult position to be in. You feel like you have to represent a whole group of people well, that you are their main contact with Muslims that maybe they've never met before. So how does that kind of show up in the book?
Yeah, it's that feeling of being the only one and there might not be another one like you. And this pressure that if you're not the best one, you could shape people's entire perception of your group based on you. And that line that her father tells her came straight out of my dad's mouth. And he didn't say it to me as far as like, you're going to be the only Muslim in your school, you better be good. He said it in terms of himself, that he's the only Arab at his work and he has to be the best because they'll say this, you know, people are going to form the perception of Arabs based on him. And without him directing it at me, I internalized it. And it is something that I still have internalized. I am not done with that baggage. You know, everywhere I go, you know, I have a foreign name, so I do worry. I do want people to, you know, even for customer service transactions, I feel like I have to be on my best behavior.
Right.
The way it shows up for Mariam, though, is what I want myself to know and what I want other children to know. That representation is a two-way street, right? Like, we need to understand that it is not our responsibility to represent an entire group. But on the other hand, when we're the ones perceiving a group, we need to understand that not one person represents an entire group. You know, the orientation goes both ways. We have to believe that we're not the representation and that other people are not the representation. I think it requires a lot of reshaping how we talk about people and interactions.
And actually, it's something that comes up in the book. Of course, she feels under enormous pressure, but sometimes she's kind of guessing what other people are thinking about her and is surprised that some of the kids at school are not they don't find it that strange that she's Muslim. She thinks everybody's kind of looking at her. And then there are instances where, more from the teachers probably, or some of the staff, where she feels like she's being kind of unfairly judged. But the other students are like, oh, yeah, I have the relative who's Jewish or somebody who's not Catholic.
Exactly.
You know,
and I even hope with the one teacher, I wanted it to be a little bit vague, that like, ambiguous. Is it really that she's thinking that? Are you applying that? Because that's just her lens, is she's seeing everything through this lens, and it makes her so hard. It makes it harder for her to receive the acceptance when it is trying to come her way. And I'm sorry, on that representation note, I just wanted to share too that I purposely did not want her to encounter any kind of real prejudice at school. One, because it was not my experience. And I had the gift of having an editor who also happens to be a Muslim in a Catholic school. And we were 100% on the same page that it wasn't her experience either. And we both agreed that it just wasn't necessary to the story. You know, that,
like you said, like there is some ambiguity, like where you have to kind of question, where is this coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I very purposefully wanted that to be ambiguous. Yeah.
Is it a common experience? Like, are there many Muslim students in Catholic schools? Because
So
I had never heard of this before.
I know. I really
Yeah.
did think like, okay, I was the only one. And then I have my editor and she inquired, okay, we're the only two. But
Mhm.
now that I've gone out in this book, with the book is out in the world, I keep seeing in the comments
Mm.
that other Muslim people chiming in said, oh, me too, me too, me too. And I think it speaks to a lot of other Muslim families making the same decision that my parents made, which is they would rather their children be raised in a religious environment than a secular environment. And they'll take whatever religion they can get, which is actually the line that I have Mariam's mom say is pulled straight from my mom's mouth.
Mm.
And I just had my launch event at a bookstore 2 nights ago, and my mom came and she was nodding her head like, I did say that. Yes, I still think that.
That's, well, so
She's very proud of herself.
well, she did a good. It sounds like it worked out really well.
It worked out, right?
Yeah. So tell us, what are your other projects? I know you're just launching this book, so maybe it's too soon to ask, but are you going to write, are we going to see Mariam again? Are you going in a different direction? What's next?
You won't meet Mariam again, but you will meet, I am working on another middle grade novel. It is also going to deal with the same kind of themes. I think this is my sweet spot. This is the conversation that I love to have. And it will still be about immigrant communities, diasporic communities, but also the faith stuff just keeps showing up for me in everything I do, even in the adult space. So that's definitely going to come up in this book too. I don't know that much more about it though to share, but that much I can promise.
What about, do you think that you'll be writing more books for adults?
I really enjoy the middle grade space.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the book community here too.
Mm-hmm.
The educators, the librarians, and the commitment to kind of teaching kids. It's so beautiful on this side of things. And I'm not done writing for adults. I think I will, but I would love to keep my hand in this world always. Like maybe to do both.
No, well, I love it. Well, whatever you decide to do next, we will be sure and share it on our stories. And if people want to see you do you want to announce any book launch events, or should they just go to your Instagram?
Yeah, if they stay watching my Instagram, I'm local to San Diego. And so I have some events coming up at some local libraries that I would love to have anybody local join me at.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and hanging in there despite the technical difficulties.
For being so patient with whatever glitch that was. It was just the strangest thing.
Well, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. I appreciate you being on here, and we appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining us and watching as always. If you joined us late, it will be up on our Instagram in just a few minutes and then later on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Huda.
I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Bye.